All right, welcome back, East Asian International Management. We are now going to be talking about Chinese management, Sun Tzu, and the art of war. There's a lot of interesting information we have about this. There are several topics that are very important, so we're using the full week to talk about them. This is one of them. This week, your homework for discussion next week is this article, writing. After next week, after we review this, I will expect you as teams to propose some other new article that the whole class should reference, or some other new video that the whole class should reference. Please don't delay. Start getting your ideas ready to take a week before those weeks are taken by somebody else. This is talking, as you can see here, about Guanxi. What is Guanxi? It's the Chinese word equivalent to networking. But it's not exactly networking, it's slightly different. It's also related to passing favors, doing favors for somebody else. And I like the last description I have here, paying it forward. I think it's a great movie, Paying It Forward. I think it's a great policy of life. I think it's a great idea for your life. It's very interesting that it's related to the art of war. Let's review the first week. First week, what was important? We started talking about general management theories. Of course, there's Maslow, Herzberg, McGregor. There's the reinforcement theories, equity theories. There's another theory starting with an E, equity, what's something like equity? One's for bonuses, one's for, what's the other one? Can you guys help me? Equity, one's for bonus. Anyway, there's a bunch of those theories. We need to know them. And then in addition to that, there's the overall management development theories. And you guys need to know, very similar to this for an exam, how Korea grew from an agrarian society to an industrial and advanced society much faster than Japan, and how Japan did it much faster than the United States. It's kind of related to the theories, economic theories, environmental theories, the open comparative management models. Those theories are important to know. The definition for sure of SRC, the definition of parochialism and ethnocentrism, and the definition of culture. What is parochial? What does it mean? Sorry? Our culture is the best. Yes. More specifically, you only know your culture. So you don't even need to say our. Just our way of doing it is the best. Ethnocentric is saying that I know there's other ways, but ours is best. I'm sorry to say that a lot of people around the world, especially students that study really, really hard, they know there's other cultures of doing things, and they will go and experience things, for example, sitting in the back of a class or not putting their hand up. They know that some people could put their hand up, but they don't because that's not really good for some reasons. That is ethnocentric. You know your way of doing things, and you think the other way is not good, so you don't try it. And that's a nice way to describe it. What's the bad way of describing it? Hitler. He knows there's Jewish ways of doing it, but that's not good. German way's best. Kill the Jews. Let's do it properly. Don't be bad like that. Learn about ethnocentrism, parochialism, SRC. What's one of the most important words or components of culture? All of it relates to culture, who you are. What's one of the most important words that I relate to culture? What makes culture? Sorry? Behavior. Your behavior is very, very important. What makes your behavior? Value. Sorry? What you value. What you value, yes. I think values are the most important part of culture. So know your values, because your values makes your attitudes make your behavior makes your actions show your culture. And your culture, what is shown to the world, is usually only 10% of all of who you are. Most of your values are hidden inside. So when you think giving money to somebody is normal, it's because you're missing 90% of their values, who they are. You can't easily see what their religion is. And then we talked about what is the culture. What is the culture of Samsung or Hyundai? If you were to describe both of those cultures, we will talk about them in more detail later, today and in later weeks. But what would you say is one word for Samsung culture and Hyundai culture that I presented previously? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Both of them are perhaps considered authoritarian, yes. What I was referring to is for Samsung, it's the number one-ism. They're supposed to always look the best. Number one-ism. Hyundai, a good word for that would be frugal. They're more of the business, professional style factory worker, hard worker, for example. And you definitely need to understand lots and lots of Hofstede. We're going to go over that again and again and again. With Hofstede, I wrote down here not just Hofstede's cultural dimensions, but Hofstede's proper or improved cultural dimensions. Again, by the Professor Nancy Adler from McGill University in Canada. She has upgraded the definition since it was confusing. Make sure you know about Max Weber and the Protestant work ethic versus Confucianism. Make sure you're aware of Professor Lodge and the other descriptions of culture. Chapter, is this working properly? Okay. Chapter 2, we got into 2 million minutes talking about cultural differences. What was that video about? American students don't spend that much of their time at their desks. That's a very politically correct way to say it, yes. What is the alternative? What is the Chinese or the Japanese, sorry, the Chinese or the Indian version? In any of their free time, they're always focused on competing with the rest of the world to get ahead. They're focused on what I think quite important. A lot of people in North America, they say, find what you love and do it. So in the American video of education, you see the high school students, one of the girls just likes to party, so she's focused on sororities and doing sorority events and sorority events related to medical school, so she's going to follow her sorority girls through medical school and be a doctor. The other guy, he kind of likes partying and graphic design and computer games, so he's always doing computer games, and he's the graphic designer for the school newspaper, and he almost never does his homework except at the very last minute. That's kind of appropriate or an accurate description of some students in North America. Of course, I wasn't like that. However, other areas in China and India, they're using something different. They see what their passion is, and they see, for example, some students might like to sing, love singing, but should you just do what you have passion for as a job? Of course, you need to do your passion and follow what's the market environment. But if I love singing, does that mean I should be a singer? What are we missing with that equation? You need your passion. You need to follow what the work environment basically needs. What else? Find out what you're good at. Even if you love something, maybe you suck at it. Maybe you're not very good at it. I like music, but I'm a terrible singer. So you need to find what your passion is and what your skills are or your talents and capabilities are and match those two with the market. And whatever that X is, or the triangle, the bullseye sign, that's what you should be focusing on for your career. And so the Indian students, they will be trying to design all of those things together, and they know for the market, they have to be competitive with a lot of the physics and the engineering for the global competitiveness. It was very interesting to see that, and it relates nowadays with education, with Korea being most dominant in international education. Other cultural differences. Of course, there's individualism, specific detail, person or word. I clearly write specific detail first because in all of the cultural descriptions, we talk about individualism or collectivism. Most people might make a mistake and say individualism equals egotistical or ego center, which is just thinking of me, but it's not just people. It's Western cultures are focused on the individual detail. Me is one detail. It's a very big detail. But also the words on the contract papers, the words that you put in Facebook, the words that you put into your company. Those are all very important for the Western people versus the collective societies. They're more interested in the relationship. That's why they only need to put one word into the conversation, like pegopa, hungry, because everybody else understands the background. So again, I write here specific detail first before person and then words. Next, individualism also relates to limited state, scientific focused, reason-based versus the collectivism or communitarianism, focus on high duty consciousness, community need, powerful state, holism, interdependence, loyalty, family, group, consensus, etc. We also get into power distance, hierarchy, career orientation. I'm going through all of these. I'm spending quite a bit of time on them because they're a big part of this course. You need to understand culture. Your culture and the other people's culture. And if you put this to application, when you're doing your term paper, think about it. Don't just write what you think in a term paper, because of SRC, you'll probably get it wrong. And I will be looking for ways that you might misunderstand. So if you do the SRC capabilities, if you think of the collectivism, survey other people and get their support as evidence for what you want to state in your paper. So cover all of these things. Here's the details of Hofstede, because it's not the best, but the most popularly discussed around the world. So Hofstede talks about power distance. It's the extent less powerful members, not the most powerful, not the rich. He doesn't care as much about the risk. The extent less powerful members of society, like the family, accept and expect power is distributed unequally. Similar to hierarchy. Next, individualism is pretty basic, as we discussed. It's the individual versus the collective, and it's not just person, it's the detail. The website, you can see it there. Do a Google search for Hofstede. I encourage you to look at that. We'll talk more about that later. Another one is, what did Hofstede refer to it as? Why is he being corrected by the Canadian politically correct person, perhaps? He talked about masculinity and femininity, and that can definitely be confused. So other people are saying it's career orientation versus quality of life, or relationship oriented. And the quality of life, modest, caring, similar to a woman's values, yes, but there are many places, many countries, for example in Thailand, where the whole country would probably seem more caring and more relationship focused than in other colder countries. Maybe Canada. Next, uncertainty avoidance. Big, 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 big one. There is the long-term orientation, but this is a little bit confusing, so I'll almost skip this. I won't test you on long-term orientation. More important than any of those with just straight culture is uncertainty avoidance. Again, Hofstede, he talked about what we just reviewed. Hall is another professional that you should know. He was famous for high context and low context related to language. Most of you love it if I don't use too many words. Most of you love it when I'm very, very specific and just short, precise. Here is how you do the class. But I don't do that on purpose, because that is what you know. And my job is to teach you the other styles. The other styles is to use many words. Here is the training manual. You want to work at my company? You want to work at GE? Congratulations, this is your first day here. Here's your training manual. Next week, I expect to see these results. Do it. Compared to in Korea, welcome, sign here, that's your desk, he's going to train you for the next 2 years. Right? It's completely different. So make sure you understand this. High context, low context. Some cultures are familiar with high levels of information in the environment, high context. Other cultures are low context. He also focused on space. Space does, in some sense, refer some cultures naturally arrange desks in a different way. In an office, for example. Other cultures are different. How can there be a difference? Where usually in Korean cultures is the highest person when you go into a restaurant? One big desk. Where would they sit? Center, good. Where exactly? Where specifically? Center at the back. At the back center facing everybody forward. Right. And the powerful people are usually on both sides. Right? That's the whole idea of right-hand man. Whoever's on my right hand is usually the most powerful person, my closest friend. Good with you. Anyway, yes, that's one area. What's another idea of space? How could it be related to, I think about flying in spaceships. I woke up this morning with my son. First thing he says is, Dad, make me into a rocket ship. He wants me to pick him up and fly him through the air. He wants to be an alien. Maybe perhaps because we look like aliens here. Is that the space that he's talking to? Could it be? It could be. How? Western cultures are many times more future thinking. And so a lot of their cartoons and movies and planning for tsunamis and planning for earthquakes are estimating based off statistics, facts, mathematics on what the future will have. Versus other cultures would have very different cartoons. Western cartoons are talking about Superman coming from another planet in space and traveling. In China, for example, they think a lot of the details come from historical, the past-oriented. And the cartoons would be talking about old days, during the old empires and the old knights, or the monkey kings, for example. So it's space and time connected. Another guy, not sure how to say this name properly, but Klukon and Strodbeck, they're also talking about the relationship to nature, people, time, human activities, time again, human time, that sense, there is a difference there. Trompenar, he's focused on universalism, particularism, individualism, collectivism, specific versus diffuse, neutral versus effective, achievement versus ascription. Again, time, relationship to the environment. Schwartz is another expert, just like Hofstede. These are all these world experts, so we all easily know Hofstede, but it would be a good idea to understand there's other ways of thinking about cultures too. Schwartz talks about conservatism, autonomy, hierarchy, egalitarian, mastery, harmony. Harmony with the environment, for example. Are you in harmony with your environment? You're Asian, which means you're maybe Buddhist, which means Buddhist likes the nature. Are you in harmony with your environment? Everybody, I think, in Korea loves trees. You love grass. I see people shaking your head. I can't actually, on the video, accept shaking your head. Thank you for trying, but yes. So what would you say? You hate the environment? No? What is you're a politically correct person. What is a politically correct way to describe how you hate the environment? You'd say dominance over nature, versus other countries might be in harmony with nature, and other countries would be subjected to nature. They would allow whatever happens with nature to control them. Versus here, we can move the mountains and move the trees in order to make our communities, and then bring the mountains and the nature back. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just different. When I'm making these bad jokes about culture, it's specifically to help you remember and learn there are differences. There is no good or bad differences with culture. Soon as you start thinking that a culture is bad, remember Hitler. Don't try to think your good version and the other strange or silly version is not good unless you want to follow in his shoes. Next, there's the big GLOBE project. In the GLOBE project, they talked about power distance, uncertainty avoidance, humane orientation, again, with the nature, for example, institutional collectivism, in-group collectivism, assertiveness, gender egalitarian, future orientation. A lot of you were saying you're going to do your term papers based on human resources. You might be thinking about referencing this GLOBE project because they've already done studies, they've already got a lot of results, and this whole idea of gender egalitarian might be something you want to put in there. Are women equal? Are these companies that say they're equal actually giving equal force to the different genders? Now I will take a short break. I think one of the teams wants to come up and present what they have found from the first 2 weeks and how they've applied it to the chapters. So can your team come up? Now back on to, that was a student's presentation of this whole chapter. I expect you, at least after next week, to start doing the same type of thing. Find something like this, videos, either MOOCs or articles to present. What this article, what these are showing are from the video that I promoted to you guys. It is a History Channel video talking about the art of war. As it says here, the art of war is, it's talking about the military strategies that can also be used for business. I found it really interesting. Right at the very beginning, it was showing this picture. Originally, he was a humble guy, and the emperor was asking, we heard about you, you're supposed to be good, but we're kind of a weak state right now. Do you really think you could train an army with our weak people to win? And he was saying, yes, he could train anybody. Really? Absolutely, I could train anybody, even these beautiful concubines around the emperor. And he said, ha ha ha, sure, go ahead, do it. So at the beginning of the video, he took these concubines and he told them very clearly what needed to be done. But what happened, if anybody saw the video? The very beginning of the video, what happened? Yes, the concubines learned these details, just like some of you might have learned a lot of these details about the textbook topics and stuff, but they stayed quiet at the back and they just giggled, hee hee hee, no, I'm not going to swing my sword. So he asked them again, as a good leader, he told them the instructions, starting with 65 pages, for example. He made it extra clear and he simplified it and clarified it. And he said, is it clear? They said, sure. Can you do it? I'm telling you, do it. And they didn't do it. What was the punishment? He chopped off the head of the leader. You're either with me or against me, as they say with, what is it, Jerry Maguire or Tom Cruise, right? And so as they show in this next part, it's as long as you're clear with things, if things are not working properly, it's not because of the staff, it's because of the leadership. And sometimes you have to be very, very strict. I will be incredibly generous. I'm not saying I'm the best leader in the world, but if you don't do these basic requirements, you will have difficulties. I don't know if I'm going to chop off your head, but we'll see. It doesn't matter if you win 100 battles. To win 100 battles is not the height of skill. What is the best thing in battles? Marketing campaigns, price wars, whatever. Should you go into a price war and try to win against your competition? Absolutely not. So what is smarter than going into a price war with some other company? The smartest thing is to never have to get into the war. Make sure you're focused on your skills. Yes, Walmart focuses on the lowest price. Yes, eMart focuses on low prices. But that's super hard. What is smarter to focus on with your strategies? Focus on your skills. What does that mean? Competitive advantage. Yes, some people think a competitive advantage is price, but more and more you've got people coming up with things that are cheaper, or companies going out of business giving the product away for free that you can't compete with. So focus on quality. Focus on your skills. Focus on being the best you can right away. So to win 100 battles is not the height of skill. It's to win without fighting. Next. Again, here, the main thing that it's talking about is intelligence. Spying is one word. A lot of people associate it with negative things, but it's the same concept as management with companies. You want to expand Hyundai into Canada, so you could just take your troops, your staff, and go set up a branch in Canada, which is what they did, but they went bankrupt. Even though they got their factory for $1. And they got over $100 million, $110 million in help to pay for their staff. They still went bankrupt because they didn't work wisely, basically with spies. Find somebody in that local market, an expert, and get them to work with you. You can look at it as a positive way. Find an insider in that other area and work with them. Work with the locals. Yes, you can learn the language. But a good example in Korea is, many of you might know, I am Korean resident. I've been here for 20 years. I speak Korean. My kids speak more Korean than English. Most of you might not know that because I know because I've got white skin, I will almost never be accepted as Korean, so I speak English. You don't always win by having your culture and language in a different area. Focus on your strengths. Next, the winning army realizes the conditions for the victory first. Period. Then it says it fights. This is the same thing I'm talking about here. Realize the conditions. Did Sun Tzu actually think about social media and management information systems when he planned this? Probably, right? You must understand the conditions of the market first. If you don't, if the company you're interested in just thinks this is good and tries to do it, they will probably fail. You must think about the conditions for victory first. Then you deal with the battle. Also related to the idea of spies, I should discuss this before I go on. The whole idea of intelligence is super, super, super important. Intelligence with social media. Since you can scan all details with social media and you can scan all information that's on the internet out there, information is everywhere. What's the difference between very big, powerful companies and the small new startups or companies that aren't? Usually, the biggest difference is the amount of information they have. Huge multinationals, they pay lots of money to get the other experts in the world to give them these consulting reports. Those reports, like Yonsei pays for all of that information. Why are you happy? What is one reason for being happy at Yonsei, the wealthiest university in Korea? Because we have the most money, we have the biggest access, the most access to the databases of the world, more than any other university in Korea. So whatever you want to know, it's easier to learn it and faster to learn it here than anywhere else, like a multinational. Small companies, like a small academy, they have to just ask people around them for something. They can't compete. Intelligence is the key to victory now. Start learning how to manage that. The big companies, like when I was working with them, they usually call it war rooms, for example. They'll have all sorts of databases on these other competitors. Maybe some people talk about it as deception. When I was working as the regional manager, the Asian manager of applied materials in Asia, the biggest thing that we did was we would always be hiring or interviewing people for jobs. Doesn't mean we actually hired, but we would be interviewing. So we would take somebody that was an executive in the competing company and interview them, and in the interview we would ask, how could you help this company? And they would tell us their secrets. Automatically, my company can do better than the other company then. So always be planning this information, how you can learn and develop. Your research reports. Don't just make a simple, silly research report. Make something that is of intelligence for your future dream company, or for the company you want to work for or control yourself. Make that information now. Realize conditions of the social media and management information system is very, very clear. Here, this last little bit, again, it's talking about know your enemy and know yourself, and in 100 battles, you will never be in peril. Know yourself, your culture, and then you know the culture of the other people around you, and you will be able to be successful. That, if you haven't noticed, is one of the biggest things I'm focusing on. Know your culture. A lot of people don't. You think you do, but you don't. When we started the class, I could ask you, what is your culture, where you're from? And most people in Korea, they would say something, and I'd say, oh yeah, you like the spicy food, you're from Bangkok. No, I'm from the big city, in Asia. Oh yeah, you're from Tokyo. Well, they can't describe the difference between Korean culture and Japanese culture. You need to know these differences. Who you are, and then who these other people are. Then you can use your advantages wisely. So that's a lot of the information from the video. This is a summary of it. It's not just me that has summarized it, and other classmates. There's other academic experts that have summarized it. For example, Professor Yi, Professor Wing, and Professor Wee. These are all different translations. The original has been written where? Do you guys even know how they wrote things down? 500 years before Christ? On a what? No, not on a stone. That might have been thousands of years BC. They wrote it on wood, yes. Teresa Case, one of the first professors, foreign professors that was working at Yonsei, she was a specialist in the early writings on wood. And so the art of war was written on these bamboo pieces of wood, yes, that could be transferred without being destroyed in wet environments and stuff. And they were not in English, obviously, and so the translations nowadays are hard to really understand the meaning. One person was saying the first chapter of 13 chapters, the art of war is 13 different chapters, is talking about detailed assessments and planning. I think that's very, very important. If you want to be successful, you must learn planning, planning, planning. If you want to be successful, learn long-term planning. The old style of long-term planning is to plan what do you want in 20 years and then work backwards to get there. Or what do you want in 10 years? Well, nowadays with technology growing so fast, you might think long-term planning is anything more than a year. And of course, short-term planning. You as students should have long-term plans. You show me those, that will be active participation. You show me your short-term plans, for example, what you need to do each day to get millions of possible things done, how you plan that, like Q4, Stephen Covey's Q4, that will help you be successful. The world's most successful managers, when they're surveyed, they almost all have one characteristic. They almost all say from at least 5 minutes to 15 minutes every day, they spend that 5 to 15 minutes just planning what exactly they need to get done that day. Because successful people have hundreds of things they need to do, or thousands of things they need to do each day. They need to prioritize what is most important for your life to get those long-term goals. Everything else is just chit-chat and wasting your time. Learn to say no to that not important stuff and not urgent stuff, and focus on what is important and not urgent, and focus on that. Urgent things are accidents. Focus on what's long-term important, and say no, or say yes, you'll help with that as soon as all the important things are done. And again, focus on your passions and your skills and the market conditions. Don't waste your time focusing over and over and over again about trying to develop something that you're not good at. If I'm never going to be good at singing, yeah, I could take singing lessons, but it might be better for me to focus on entrepreneurship, something that I'm better at. Especially when there's so many other good singers that can compete with me now in the open world. Next, of course, the challenge. Some people say it's translated as waging war. Focus on the opportunities. Think positively. What are your strengths? What is your plan of attack? What is your long-term plan, short-term plan? How are you positioning yourself? In Korea, we have supposedly the best students in the world here. When we say the world, we're repeating what a lot of North Americans say. Best people in the world are in New York, or best people in the world are in Silicon Valley, or best people in the world are in Toronto. But the reality nowadays is you're competing against, what, 1.3, 1.4 billion people in China right next to us, and another 1.2, 3 billion people in India right next to them, and how many other billions of people around the world that are all connected with people or things in your pocket, right? So start thinking about what is your position. Use your strengths. The fact that we're in the fastest growing part of the world. The fact that we have the fastest growing country and economy in the world. Fastest growing history in the world. Fastest internet technology and the best internet technology in the world. The fact that you are from East Asia and you can speak these languages. The fact that you are culturally, genetically connected to China, so you're almost the same as that family. You should have a better advantage to people that come from the other side of the world that are doing things in a different way. What is your position? How can you help overcome the problems that they need? Directing people, of course. Learn how to direct yourself and, of course, others. Learn how to delegate would be good. You cannot do everything in the world alone. Your homework tonight is to understand why the world's best education will not get you anywhere alone. Being the luckiest person in the world will not get you very successful. What you need is something else. What is it that you're missing? Learn how to direct. What are your weaknesses and strengths? What's the illusion and reality? Again, in the past, everybody needed to be balanced and develop. I think it's important to focus on your strengths. Understand your teachers, your parents, many people, everybody that went through the educational system on the planet now have been programmed in a certain way by a certain person that started this system, but his system was prejudiced or racist or biased in his favor. He thought it was good to take everybody together in batches, otherwise known as the same year going into school, put them through the same type of program so that if you went through the program well, they'd put a stamp on your head and then they'd get you into these big companies, which you'd work like ants for somebody else. So learn how you can work with your strengths, not just overcoming the weaknesses that somebody else points out. Next, engaging a force. Engage people around you. Be proactive. There's a lot of ways to translate this. I'm taking creative ways to translate it, but these are the 13 chapters. Variations and adaptability. Of course, you must learn how to be adaptable. You must learn how to work with the world around you. What is the trend? The idea of social media being everywhere. The idea of internet now making education free. There's almost no reason to pay for Harvard anymore. There's almost no reason to go to Oxford anymore because you can get it free. And the idea of situational positioning. The fact that you know that before most other people. The fact that you have the best education around so far. The fact that you're from East Asia. You are positioned better than others. Use it now while you can. The 9 situations, the 9 battlegrounds, the conditions, that's one thing to talk about. Fiery attack, attacking with fire was another thing. And again, use of intelligence, intelligence, intelligence. What does all of this mean? Detailed assessment and planning. Again, I encourage you to understand long-term and short-term planning. What is Q4 related to? Anybody know? Quadrants. Quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what is important. This is what is urgent. You should be focusing on the short term. You should focus on which one? What is important and urgent? Here, important, urgent. Important, not urgent. Or this is urgent and not important. This is urgent and, is that right? Not urgent, not important. Which one should we be focused on? Definitely this area. Anything that's urgent is an accident. Your 20-year plans or 10-year plans or 2-year plans should be focused on here. There's a very good book by a young guy about your age, Timothy Ferriss. He wrote a good book that made him a multi-millionaire, and the basics of his book was basically you can do anything almost immediately. You don't need to plan for 20 years. You could get it done with technology immediately. Do you need to do market research for a product anymore? No. You can come up with an idea, put it on a website, survey other people in seconds to find out who is interested. If people are interested, you can in seconds find a manufacturer that can do it on the other side of the world. In Russia or India or China, they can manufacture it. Find out who is interested in getting it. If they want, they can give you deposits. Use those deposits to get it made. Why does it take 20 years to make a factory to make music guitar bags or whatever? You should be able to get this stuff done immediately. Learn how to work with the times around you. Next, of course, the challenge explains how to understand the economy of war, how success requires making the winning play, which in turn requires limiting the cost of competition and conflict. Of course, how you deal with these challenges. Plan of attack defines the source of strength, not just the size. Which is very, very good because coming from Korea and most countries in the world now are not as big as China. What is your strength? What is your strength? Positioning explains the importance of defending your existing position and your strengths until you can advance them. Don't focus on just trying to develop your weaknesses. What are you better at than somebody else and start capitalizing on that. Your energy, your directing. I like to believe that Sun Tzu was focused on renewable energy, solar panel, wind turbines. You start taking care of the environment, you start helping other people, you start giving a good example, and the other good people around you, if they see you paying it forward, helping others, hopefully they will turn around and help you in return. What goes around comes around. Start learning that stuff. China has learned it's important. The government is making it a policy. You must be energy efficient. Which companies are energy efficient? One of the fastest growing companies related to cosmetics, shampoos. This type of can is pretty much impossible to find in North America. A lot of the cans in North America might be this big, or shampoo bottles are probably this big. So if you want to sell these North American big bottles in India or Pakistan or parts of China where they can't do it, it's going to be very hard because they don't have the money. What can you do? You can take it apart and just sell one individual serving. A lot of the companies that did that became super, super successful when most North Americans, they don't want one thing. They want to buy bulk. They want the Walmart thing. So start thinking outside of the box. Your energy, your directing. And of course, weak points, strong points, illusion and reality. We talked about deception quite a bit. Explain how your opportunities come from the openings in the environment caused by the weaknesses of others. Focus on the problems that you can solve well. Focus on your strengths, most importantly. Maneuvering to engage others. Explains the dangers of direct conflict. You shouldn't be fighting. Don't go into these price wars. Just focus on what you're good at. If you really love it, you're going to do it all the time. The other person might not love it as much as you, and so they're going to take off weekends. They're going to take off evenings and go party and think about something else. Whether if you love something, you will do it if you have the skills for it and matches the market. You will do it on night times and weekends and holidays so much that you do it more than the others, you will be better at it than the others. And because you love it, when your customers and your employees come in, they're going to see you loving something. You're going to be happy. They're going to want to be around you and work with you. So start focusing on what you love and have the skills for and the market wants versus somebody that's paid $1 million. I worked in the companies where almost everybody around me had $1 million stock options. Everybody around me, 2 companies now that happened, I was in. Everybody around me was a millionaire with the paychecks. Unfortunately, the biggest company, the most successful company, I'm not going to say the names, everybody there hated their job. Almost everybody hated their life. Why did they continue? Because of the money. What's the point of life? At least the second company, we were able to expand and partner with somebody else. They basically bought us and gave everybody $1 million. Those people were much happier. They continued to do the job they loved, just with new yachts and stuff. Focus on the good things and what you're good at with your skills and the market conditions. The variations in tactics. This focuses on the need for flexibility in the various responses. It explains how to respond to shifting circumstances successfully. Of course, moving the force describes different situations in them. Attack by fiery, or the fiery attack, explains the use of weapons. Of course, this doesn't mean you have to work with guns and cannons and stuff like that. And the last one again, intelligence, intelligence, intelligence. Work wisely. Almost everybody in these stages is familiar with working very, very hard, but focus more on just working wisely, using the intelligence. You can do your term paper in 1 week's work. You find one article and then just absorb some of these other articles from the other people around you, and that is enough to suffice your requirements. You could do the minimum that way. That's wise work. You're done. The whole course work is basically done for that term paper. But if you love it, you're going to keep doing it. And since it's already done, you're just making it better and better and better all the time. So your paper will be very valuable to the other people around you, and you will be able to make your own opportunities. If you know your enemies and know yourself, you can win 100 battles without a single fight. Back to culture, back to Hofstede, back to Hall and Cluckhorn. If you only know yourself but not your opponent, you may win or you may lose. If you know neither yourself nor your enemy, you can always endanger yourself. If you know both yourself and your enemy, you can win 100 battles without single loss. Overconfidence is dangerous. 100 victories and 100 battles is not the most skillful. It doesn't matter if you can win all of these small fights. It matters how successful you are overall. Finally here, the business warfare, it's based on deception. That's what a lot of people associate with the art of war, but I think it should not be. It should be focused on working wisely, working smart. Know who you are, know what your strengths are, know the market conditions, and play those together. Success comes from strategy, skill, study. We're born without any. Your natural tendency to react to a challenge, maybe fight or flight. Well, understand that might be natural reactions, but work with the surroundings. Overall, as you can see in the background of this picture, these are strips of wood, and the writing is on it. There's 13 of them with the Chinese characters running down them. There's 13 principles. They boil down, they summarize into two main issues. Who are you? What are you good at? What is your position? How can you advance your position? How can you use the conditions around you to advance? Of course, listening, very important. Listening is very, very important. You need to survey and develop Guanxi with other companies. As you're developing your Guanxi with other companies, that surveying, even now as a student, even if you have several years before you graduate, before you get your master's or PhD, having the relationships now and developing them so every term paper you do helps them is going to make you so much more valuable than just anybody else with a 100% grade point average. Developing the friendships with them now allow you to get that position when your friend will not tell anybody else. Overall, listen to what the other people want, survey the other people, consider when somebody has done something wrong or contrary, and find out how you can still work in the right way. If you have a problem during the surveys, still don't get upset, don't lose your patience, keep people friendly around you, keep that social network, keep the Guanxi. It's never really going to help to hurt somebody's feelings. It's never really going to help to insult somebody. Especially in East Asia, where it is illegal to hurt somebody's image. You go to jail for doing it. In Western countries, saying Coke tastes better or Pepsi tastes too sweet is fine. Here, it is illegal. Soon as you start defaming or ruining the image of somebody else, in some countries, you will go to jail. So just focus on your strengths. Listen to what they are saying, learn from them, and develop, but be very proactive. Combine your passion, your skills, and the market needs. Think honestly, practice, and continue to improve it. Overall, we're almost finished. My version of it, then we'll get into the technical, theoretical side, the gobbledygook. What I think is interesting here is the art of war. It is a Chinese strategy. It was one of the first business strategies in the world. Welcome, we're back to the beginning of where is the power of the world coming from. It comes from General Su, 6th century BC. It's obviously pretty old. 13 chapters devoted to one aspect of development, warfare. Art of War is the oldest, most successful books on strategy, heavily influenced military, business tactics, and much more. Sun Tzu recognized the importance of positioning and strategy, and that position is affected both by objective conditions in the physical environment and subjective opinions and competitive actors in the environment. He taught that strategy was not planning in the sense of working through a to-do list. However, planning is very, very important, but rather it requires quick and appropriate responses to changing conditions. I teach a lot of entrepreneurship. Most people think entrepreneurship means you have to make a business plan. Well, not necessarily. The purpose of making a business plan is to think about what are the conditions. Think about how to do these things, and then after you have the ability to think about these things and come up with solutions for them, and know more about these details than other persons, you are better able to do it than anybody else. So even if the conditions change, you still know more about it than somebody else. You just have small new conditions to learn about. Planning works in controlled environment, but in a competitive environment, competing plans collide sometimes, creating unexpected situations. Always be aware of your situation. Anybody know who traveled the world first? Who discovered the world? Columbus? Anybody want to vote for Columbus or somebody else? Anybody know who was Columbus? Some Spanish guy that was basically sentenced to jail. He was a prisoner after he sailed. I believe he went to jail too. Anything else you know about Columbus?
Chinese.
He was Chinese? This is the second time today I caught you with your, what is it, low context, high context. Focus on that, yes. So Columbus is a Chinese person that did what?
Not talking about Columbus. The first one to travel around the world. Isn't that like some? I heard some rumor that like it could be the Chinese.
You heard this rumor. What are these pictures we're looking at? The bottom right box is looking at two boats. There's one small little toy boat, wooden boat in the front. That small little boat, I believe there were a few of them that sailed. That was Columbus's boat, I believe the Santa Maria. There were a few boats with Columbus, those small little boats. They had several dozen or a couple hundred men at the most with Columbus. There were like 30,000 men in one of those other big boats, and that big boat had a fleet of boats. Many, many, many of these big boats when they were sailing around the world. The boat at the back was the Chinese boat exploring the world, and you can see the map where one person is guessing where they sailed. Academic theories, they're guesses based on his evidence, whether people accept it or not. But it's proven for sure, undoubtedly, that this big Chinese ship sailed all throughout Asia, over around India for the spices, throughout the Mediterranean, and all the way around to the far side of Asia and into Europe. He basically was where Columbus was something like 76 years before Columbus sailed. Where did Columbus get the idea of sailing around the world? Who invented the concept of the world is round? Chinese. Chinese. Who invented the compass? Chinese. Navigating by stars? Chinese. Who started sailing these big boats 76 years before Columbus? The Chinese. And so this guy, he's gone around and he's found remains of these big Chinese ships and Chinese DNA and communities in each of these other provinces, in each of these land masses around the world, 76 years before Columbus started sailing across the ocean to a new continent. Columbus was looking for China. Why did he go that way to find China? He found the wrong area. Anyway, you should know the Chinese emperor at the time. Of course, it says here that the Ming Dynasty, Admiral Zhe He, however you pronounce this, his treasure fleet from 1405 to 1433, he was sailing around the world. It's not just a one day or a short trip. For a long time, they were sailing around the world. And he definitely went at least 7 different voyages, at least more than 30 different countries, around Sri Lanka, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, all the way around to the far side of Africa is definitely very, very clear, with navigation of the stars and the compasses and stuff, 70 years before Christopher Columbus. And so these are pictures of what they think the boats are like. And the next slide is controversial. Some people think it's hocus pocus. A lot of Americans are thinking it's crap, it's not true. A lot of European people think, especially the people in Columbus's background, they're saying it might not be true. But a lot of people are saying he's got a lot of facts. This was an American military executive that was commanding a submarine around the world for many, many years. And while he was going around the world, he kept finding everywhere he went Chinese remains hundreds of years ago before Columbus's time. And so he came up with this theory and he put it together. And the book name is called 1421, the year China discovered America. Here's another version of it. Calvin Menzies, 1421, the year China discovered the world. I encourage you to take a look at it. The whole concept of this dragon, the mythical ideas, what you're supposed to do, what is the best strategy. It's just concepts for you to think about. You need to learn how to manage what's best for you. Is it smart to do exactly what I tell you is smart management? I've been doing management for many years. I've been a professor for several years. I've got PhD studies, I've got much, much more business experience. Should you do what I tell you to do? Is that smart? Especially when I'm an old guy, and when I went to school, they didn't have the internet access that you guys have. I didn't have email. I started getting email after I finished university. You guys were born, I think you came out of your mother with a smartphone. You guys have so much more of this. You live in the future. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 2 years. So you need to take this information and digest it how you think is best. So the theories, what are the theories? Here are some people, they were saying that the art of war is the marketplace, is the battlefield. The Asian viewpoint, success or failure directly influences family. Nation's economic boom means nation's well-being. Well, a lot of people hear that you should do it the American way. You should do it the Harvard way. America's great. Why do we hear that? You want to make money? Should you do it the GE way? Who invented money? Chinese, right? So the whole concept of who you are, who the people around you are, you might want to consider that. A lot of the Asians, you're not supposed to be bragging. You're supposed to basically be loyal and harmonious and just subservient in society in some ways, versus the Western concept, you promote your skills, you promote what you're good at. You take a chance, you say whatever you want to try to win. So the Western concepts, they're guessing sometimes at what's good and bad. So they're coming up with a lot of these theories. Like the whole idea of the Harvard negotiation project, they're saying that the Chinese negotiation strategy is basically not developed, it's not really good. They argue, they drink alcohol during these negotiations, that's terrible. When they might not have thought the Chinese negotiation, drinking alcohol in Japan, China, and Korea, that gets you drunk. What better way to find out the truth of your partners than to see them when they're absolutely out of control? So having somebody drunk like that is an advantage in negotiations in many ways. And it builds relationships. So some of these things that are promoted by the West, make sure you understand the background of them. China's military strategies consist of two parts. Bing, soldiers, Fa, doctrine, it's the art of war. 1772 to 1221 BC, classic strategies were written in this period. Confucius, Mencius, Lao Tzu, Sun Tzu, all of these people were great influencers on strategy overall. Originally, they were the Chinese strategy. If you want to know more about Confucius, there is that very, very interesting Harvard massive open online course talking about Confucianism by 2 professors online. It's free. It's the Harvard Extension School talking about just Confucius. Type that in Google, Harvard Extension School, Confucius, you can see that video. It's talking about the whole life when they're growing up, what was important around there. It's quite interesting. Sun Tzu was the 4th century BC. Sun Tzu Bing Fa, the most complete reputable book, influenced obviously China and of course Korea, Japan, Minamoto. These guys are very, very powerful people that have been influenced by that. And of course, you can see other examples, even, who is it, Paris Hilton supposedly is addicted to the idea of art of war. The strategies were influenced by the Taoist thinking style. No difference in goodness and evil, in easiness and difficulty, in high and low, in love and hatred. It's all basically moving back and forth. You need to know where you are and where the other person is and position yourself accordingly. They're not essentially different. They depend on the circumstances. Compatibility of companies and military. Companies are armies. They strive for a favorable position by defeating their competitors while defending themselves. Both competitors and wars are confrontational activities in some sense. Generally, wars are confrontational and destructive versus business strategies are constructive. That's some of the biggest differences. Moral influence, of course, is very, very important. You want to be a good leader, that's a big part of being a good military general, CEO, you need to be a good leader. Just sitting down, waiting for somebody else to tell you what to do is not exactly the definition of being a leader. Anybody have any comments? Did you guys find anything else interesting? Anybody want to share something? I can't take up too much more time, but do you guys have any other comments that you guys have found that you wanted to share? Feel free to talk throughout this. Any idea Toyota is famous for it? Where did Toyota get it from? When did Toyota start with it? Anybody know? Anybody know the Deming Prize, for example? I'm not talking Demi Moore, the Deming Prize. 1951, there was an American guy, he developed a professor, he developed a research paper, could have been a student, I am not exactly sure. Or he was a professor eventually, maybe he started as a student. He wrote a paper talking about the way to be efficient in management. That idea of efficiency and avoiding problems and fixing problems and just doing things clearly without problems became so successful that Japanese, long time before Toyota, invited him over, 1951, to teach in Japan how to do this. So the students that developed this paper became kind of famous online, were invited over to conferences around the world, which is exactly what you guys can do. And then the Japanese became so excited about this that the Japanese are paying lots and lots of money, these big awards, for the companies to get this Deming Prize named after this other guy. After that, 70 years later, back in the 1970s, then they started to make new theories about mathematical ways to be efficient, for example, statistical ways to be efficient, loss reduction, for example, and then we started to get up with Toyota. What is the Toyota's focus? Anybody know? Six Sigma, what is Six Sigma about? Different? Anybody know what Six Sigma is? Six Sigma is basically Six Sigma, 1 in a million. So you have one defect in your management out of 1 million tries. So that's just a way to start understanding the idea of how it applies with this stuff. It's definitely constructive stuff, and it's not just during wartime. If a general treats his soldiers, let's get back to this now, if a general treats his soldiers as his own beloved sons, they will stand by him until death. Again, that's much, much better to work with than deceiving somebody else. The Chinese way, supposedly to build a big company, you want to have a big company go into China, you're not allowed to go in with the most advanced robotics and technologies. Sometimes you're not allowed. Anybody understand why? GE, for example, they make a lot of high-tech equipment. Rocket ships, nuclear devices. They've got robots that can make these things. GM, Ford, car plants, they have a lot of robots that can make these plants. Sometimes the Chinese government say you can't bring that into China. Why? What could they possibly be thinking? Yeah, you might get rich, but you've got to think of us as a family. China is a family. You go into a community and you've got to help the family. So yeah, a robot's nice, but it's better to have 100 people working there, 100 people, a bigger family taken care of, than just 5 people getting rich. Start thinking about that in the good ways, yes? According to Sun Tzu, a good general should possess 5 important qualities that we talked about earlier. Wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. I went through, supposedly in wisdom, I gave you 65 pages of how to do things and what's proper management. And then I tested, do you understand? There were some questions, so I simplified it into 1 page. I have to be strict now. Anybody that's not following along? We shall see what happens. I will be sincerely available to help you. I am here to help you guys develop. Some of you know, you've come to me, you've talked for jobs. Some of you might know some stories about how I heard students wanted to do some sort of job. I talk to them about it. I tell them go make a resume or write down something about things. Come back and show me that. And then after, I'll see what I can do. That student, no names here, as soon as they left my office, I made a phone call and I got that student a job with an investment bank from Europe that night. but the student never came back to my office. So make sure that you understand sincerity and taking that extra step is kind of important. Don't just wait for you to graduate. Start living your life now. Be brave. Next, good general should avoid these 5 qualities. Don't be reckless. Don't be a coward. Don't be quick-tempered. Be sensitive sometimes, but not too sensitive. Don't be over-compassionate. Make sure you understand your good points and your bad points. Of course, I think this is pretty straightforward. The climate in the train, of course, there are variables. Wartime, for example, the climate is changing conditions, weather conditions, temperatures, days, hours. The train can stand for military operations. Of course, business is physical infrastructure. There's many variables to consider. Strengths. Definitely focus on your strengths. A lot of people understand the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Basic MBA programs, they teach you must know the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Not just yours, but you must know your environment's strengths. What's the strength of me having long hair? Not here, I don't have very much hair here, I mean here. What's the strength of me having white skin here? What's the strength that you have? What's the strength of the environment? What's the strength of your competitors? How can you use your strengths positioning with them? What are your weaknesses and what are their weaknesses? All of these conditions combine. Create the favorable environment. Make sure that you understand the whole idea of, I think this is very, very good now, why East Asia is growing so fast, because it's so focused on training and doctoring. Everybody values education so much more than most other countries in the world. Most people in Korea study, as in China, more hours for education than anywhere else in the world. That's why you went from 1960s and 50s, 60s, and 70s with almost no education to the world's highest level of education in the world. You guys are aware that the OECD had PISA studies, P-I-S-A studies, that has said that Korea has the best culture for learning in the world, the best environment for learning in the world. Finland comes close, but Korea is excellent in many of these areas. The West is far, far, far behind in many areas. Delegating, 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 delegating. There's so much to delegating. I'd love to talk about this for so long, but I can't take up too much more time. Make sure you understand the importance of it. You can delegate your project to somebody else to get done. That's not cheating. Not if you're wise. I'm not saying cheat. You could get paid to hire somebody with grant money to do the work and the surveys for you. That seems wise. How many of you have thought of that? Discipline, of course. A summary. Where are basically at the end? Sun Tzu's strategic ideas contribute to business competitiveness, moral influence, general qualities, relativism. The end of the textbook. Every chapter has questions at the end. And these questions at the end are kind of important. You guys are welcome to suggest what is a good question. You guys are welcome to talk about what might be good exam questions. This course has been taught for several years. You guys should be aware that the questions that I've put on the old exams are already in the Facebook account. You guys have to dig for them, but they're there. Most tests you guys are aware of, the letters might change, but the basic concepts being tested are usually the same. How is Taoism related? Who is Sun Tzu? Why is his work so important? What's the difference between military and business strategy? What option is most preferred by Sun Tzu? What option is most preferred? Generally, knowing yourself before and knowing the others. Win without fighting. Win on your strengths. There's a bunch of references here. Any other questions before we go on? It is time to go. We have finished. See you later, folks.